Well, hello, everybody. Welcome to Radio Lux Lucet, episode 42. The title of today's episode is Pope Francis Calls for the New World Order. And welcome to the program. This is Steve Matthews. Thanks for joining me. I really appreciate that. I guess I should start maybe calling myself Late Night Steve or something like this, because it seems like about the only time I get a chance to actually do one of these programs is late at night. Right now it's about, it's about 20 after 1 on a Sunday morning. It's Sunday. It's March 28th, 2021. So welcome for anybody up late watching this live. Thanks for joining me. And also welcome to those who are listening to this as the podcast. It's always great to have all of you here. Well, I have some good news here, some good personal news here anyway. I'm on vacation this next week. I guess this is kind of like the adult version of spring break or something like that. I wasn't sure I was going to be able to take time off. I've been so backed up at work and behind. I wasn't sure that I'd be able to take time. I've actually managed to accrue a fair amount of vacation time, and things have been so busy I haven't been able to take any of it. But I was actually able to get caught up some here over the past couple weeks, and things are in pretty good shape. So Lord willing, I've taken some time off here this next week, and I intend to enjoy myself. I don't have any big plans as far as going anywhere, but I do have a lot of plans though. This is always one of the things that's kind of interesting about taking vacations. I always come up with this list of things that I'm going to get done, this big long list, and I'm really ambitious, and I usually find I get I think about a quarter of the things done that I'm going to get done, and then boom, it's the week's gone, and I'm back at work. I don't know how that works that way, but it's amazing how time flies on your week off. And well, I guess if I get a quarter of it done, I guess that's something, right? At least it's not nothing. It's getting something done. So I'm going to enjoy this next week off, enjoy the nice weather, and maybe get a chance to get out and do some things, and also do some work too. I want to have some fun, but I also want to get some stuff done. It's about that time of year too, where I live, that it's about time to start mowing the lawn. I know it was officially spring last week, but it's not for me officially spring until you get that smell of cut grass and in mulch and all of that other stuff. And sometimes I think working in the yard is kind of a pain. And sometimes, honestly, I kind of like it. I mean, it's just nice. I work in my particular job. I spend all my time at a computer screen, typing stuff up, sending emails, all of this kind of thing. It's sometimes nice just to get out of the house, get outside, do something, that kind of thing. And I guess that's one of the reasons why I like to go bicycling on the weekends as well, which I did today. Had a chance to go out and ride some. Or I guess it was on Saturday, I should say. And that's always such a great time. Just get out, clear my head, get out and, feel the sun and all that type of thing. So that was a great time today. I hope that this podcast, I hope that I'm able to finish this thing here, and I hope it doesn't get too noisy. It seems like there's a little bit of a thunderstorm decided to roll into the area. So if you hear some rumbling in the background, it may be that, or hear some rain coming down, because it's coming down kind of hard right now. Hopefully the electricity will hold up here, so we won't have a problem. But anyway, so let's get into to today's topic here. The title of this episode is Pope Francis Calls for New World Order. And I got this particular title here. It's actually just from an article that I found in Breitbart. And this article dates from a couple of weeks ago. This is March 15th, 2021. And in fact, let me go ahead. I'm gonna bring that article up here, and let's see if we can get this going here. Do a screen share. Let's see, we got that, and we got that, and there we go. Okay, so here we go. You can see the article in Breitbart. Pope Francis calls for new world order after the pandemic. So, it's truly an amazing thing, the way the globalists and the authoritarians have used this pandemic, and I would say it's a fake pandemic. I think that this has been oversold by a lot, and I think it's been oversold for the purpose of pushing an agenda. And I think we're seeing here that the basic agenda that the Pope's pushing, and I really do think that this is the main thrust behind the agenda, is to push globalism. It's to push New World Order. And Breitbart is actually one of the few, that might be the most high profile organization that has covered this story. It's been buried and ignored by all of the major mainstream news outlets, at least that I've been able to find. I couldn't find any coverage of this story in any of the mainstream publications. I'm talking here about the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, NBC, ABC, CBS here in the United States, or even some of the major organizations overseas, whether you're talking about the BBC or some of the British publications. I haven't been able to find any coverage of this except in the alternate press. And Breitbart is the most prominent of all the outlets that I could find this story in. So let's kind of dive in here and see what it has to say. Pope Francis insisted a new book, Things Will Never Be the Same in a Post-Pandemic World, calling instead for the establishment of a new world order. In a book-length interview with journalist Domenico Agasso titled God and the World to Come, scheduled for release in Italian on Tuesday, the pontiff reiterates his case for the Great Reset, with a shift away from financial speculation, fossil fuels, and military buildup toward a green economy based on inclusiveness. Now, this should come as a shock to absolutely no one, at least if you followed any of the work that I've done on this podcast or in some of the articles that I've written on the blog. And in fact, what we see here really is the Pope echoing the very same kind of language that is coming out of the World Economic Forum, as well as other globalist organizations, in an attempt to use this so-called pandemic as an excuse for a massive power grab. And the article continues here. After the coronavirus pandemic, quote, no one today can afford to rest easy, end quote, the Pope declares in a lengthy extract from the book published by Vatican News. The world will never be the same again, says the Pope. But it's precisely within this calamity that we must grasp those signs which may prove to be cornerstones of reconstruction. Let us all keep in mind that there is something worse than this crisis, the drama of wasting it. Now, that's kind of interesting there, is he sounds just like Rahm Emanuel. He was, I think, I guess he was one of Barack Obama's chiefs of staff during his Barack Obama's term in office. And in the famous quote that's been attributed to Rahm Emanuel is, never let a good crisis go to waste. So I guess the Pope, maybe he's learning from Rahm Emanuel. And he doesn't, he wants to make sure to never let a good crisis go to waste. And let's see. Here's a tweet from Breitbart here. It says, the Great Reset is real. It's happening now and will lead to devastation. Worse, much, much worse than the Weimar Republic, a German economist has warned. So, yeah, I mean, the Great Reset, basically what it is, it's a reordering, not just of the world's financial system, but really of the whole world economy. And it's being pushed by some of these very elite organizations, such as the World Economic Forum, such as the Roman Catholic Church, people like individuals such as, say, Bill Gates and the whole globalist entourage out there, of which there are a number of people. And the Pope continues here. We can heal injustice by building a new world order based on solidarity. You notice that, building a new world order based on solidarity, studying innovative methods to eradicate bullying, poverty, and corruption. He adds, all working together, each for their own part, without delegating and passing the buck. This new world order will be based on eradicating inequalities and attending to the environment, the Pope affirms. We can no longer blithely accept inequalities and disruptions to the environment, he declares. The path to humanity's salvation passes through the creation of a new model of development, which unquestionably focuses on coexistence among peoples in harmony with creation. So I guess he wants everybody to sing Kumbaya, it appears. Now, what I think is particularly interesting here is at the very end of this article. I'm just going to read this. It's the last paragraph in the article, and this is again quoting the Pope. Against this planetary discord that is nipping the future of humanity in the bud, we need political action that is the fruit of international harmony. He declares, urging for an end to, quote, short-sighted nationalism, end quote, and other forms of political selfishness in favor of multilateral solutions. So, once again here, the Pope comes out. Not only does he come out for the Great Reset, which is just another term for world government. We talk about the New World Order, the Great Reset. These are all terms that are favored by the people that promote world government. That's this is the argot. This is the lingo that the globalists use, and of course the Pope has to put down or denigrate nationalism, which he calls short-sighted and political selfishness. This is all a very, very bad thing, apparently, and the Pope he's not too happy about that, which is not surprising, and that should surprise exactly no one. Now, what I'd like to do here too is I want to kind of move on and talk a little bit about the New World Order and its opposite, the Westphalian World Order. The New World Order is geopolitical Romanism. The Westphalian World Order is geopolitical Protestantism. So let's kind of dive into that a bit here. Rome loves the idea of world government, and the popes of Rome and other church officials are not shy at all about expressing this. I mean, one of the worst kept secrets in the entire world is that the Roman Catholic Church loves global government, loves world government, that the popes love world government, and sometimes you say that to people and think, well, that's just conspiracy theory. How can you say that? Well, the reason that I can say that is because the popes and other church officials say this, and they say it repeatedly, and they say it explicitly in the clearest possible terms. So this is, if it's a secret, if the Roman Catholic Church advocating for world government is a secret, it's probably the worst kept secret ever. And you can take them at their word. I mean, they're telling you what it is that they want to do, but so many people seem to want to ignore that. Now let's take a look here. And this is a quote out of the papal encyclical Laudato Si, and it's also requoted by Pope Francis in his latest encyclical Fratelli Tutti. This is a quote here from Pope Francis. Quote, given this situation, it is essential to devise stronger and more efficiently organized international institutions with functionaries who are appointed fairly by agreement among national governments and empowered to impose sanctions. So you got that? Empowered to impose sanctions. Now, another quote, and this is something that, let's see, this is also from Fratelli Tutti. Pope Francis says this, in this regard, I would also note the need for a reform of the United Nations organization and likewise of economic institutions and international finance so that the concept of the family of nations can acquire real teeth. So, they want the United Nations to have real teeth, by which they mean that they're empowered to impose sanctions, apparently. Now, again, you can find probably dozens. And one of the things I guess I need to do here one of these days when I get the time, and I'm probably not going to have the time when I'm off, maybe I can at least start it, I don't know, but to compile a list of all the quotes by popes and by other officials of the Roman Catholic Church in calling for world government, because it's not hard to find these things at all. They don't, like I say, it's maybe the worst kept secret in the world. They make this very explicit. One of my favorite examples of claims, of statements for world government is out of an article. It was written by Rod Dreher in the American Conservative, and this actually was an article that dates back to 2011. And the title of this particular article, it's called "Vatican Calls for World Government, Really?" And it's kind of interesting because it's written by Rod Dreher, and Rod Dreher is he's a Bigfoot columnist. I mean, he was at the time, of course, he was writing for the American Conservative, and I know that he's gone on. His work appears in a lot of major publications. So he's a guy that's pretty well known as a columnist. I think he started out life. He was some kind of some kind of an evangelical. Don't recall whether he was a Baptist or a Methodist. I think it was one of those two. And he went on and became a Roman Catholic, and I believe now he is Orthodox. But in 2011, and I don't know what phase of his religious beliefs were at the time, but he wrote this article, and he sounds almost a little bit breathless when you read through that. And let me just read through a bit of his article here. Here's news about a new economic policy statement from the Vatican. Lots of good stuff in the document about abuses in the neoliberal world economy and the need for reform. But then there's this from Reuters. The Vatican calls for the establishment of a supranational authority with worldwide scope and universal jurisdiction to guide economic policies and decisions. Such an authority should start with the United Nations as its reference point, but later become independent and be endowed with the power to see to it that developed countries were not allowed to wield excessive power over weaker countries. and Rod Dreher seems actually pretty amazed by this. And he writes here a little bit later, he says, Lord have mercy. What was once only in the febrile prophetic imagination of Jack Chick and Hal Lindsey is now a press release from the Vatican. A friend who's not an evangelical writes, this is going to freak the evangelicals out. But it makes me wonder what the heck is going on in the minds of these Vaticanites. Don't they have a clue how the world will perceive this? One world authority? Really? And then Dreher comes back and he says, count me with the evangelicals. It freaks me out too, and it'll freak out many Orthodox Christians. I bet it has the same effect on not a few Catholics as well. Maybe Malachi Martin wasn't such a conspiracy freak after all. All right, so I guess a few things about this. I think it's interesting that this friend of Rod Dreher says this is going to freak the evangelicals out. Well, I don't know that it really did. It should freak the evangelicals out. I mean, Protestants should absolutely be talking about this all the time. But what do you hear from Protestants? You hear thunderous silence. You know, Protestant pastors are afraid to criticize Rome, and it's almost theologically incorrect to do so. I remember one time I was at a men's. Oh, it was just a men's Bible study. And I don't even remember how the topic came up, but there's some talk about Roman Catholicism. And I made the comment, that the Roman Catholic Church believes in the real presence of Christ in the Mass. And I got the sense that it was kind of an uncomfortable topic to bring up. And then some of the fellows that were there actually tried to push back on it. They say, "Oh, well, no, they don't. They don't teach that." And there were some people there who should have known better, and yet they insisted that I was wrong in characterizing the teaching of the Roman Catholic Church as one of the features of the teaching, anyway, is that they believe in the real presence of Christ in the Mass. Well, that is one of the most important distinctives of Roman Catholic teaching. And you can find that they're very open about this, but you kind of get this sense that so many, even people who would call themselves Bible believing or conservative evangelicals or Protestants, will not don't understand what Rome teaches, or if they do, they seem to be embarrassed to talk about it or to criticize Rome for the teaching that they have, for the anti-Christian teaching of the Roman Catholic Church. The Rome, by all means, teaches the real presence of Christ in the Mass. And that's not a side doctrine for Rome. That is central to Roman Catholic to the Roman Catholic liturgy. It's not something that is an option for the Roman Catholic Church and for the Roman Catholic people. Now that they are required to believe this. Now I'm not going to get into a big long discussion about the Mass right now, but I simply just wanted to point out the fact that there's, first of all, a lot of ignorance about Roman Catholic doctrine among evangelicals, and again, even people who should know better seem to not know. And this comment by Rod Dreher's friend that that this idea of one world government that's going to manage our finances and it's universal in scope and all this other stuff, and then that's going to freak people out. Well, yeah, it should freak people out, but it doesn't. And in fact, it doesn't seem most evangelicals are even listening to what Rome is saying, and they should listen to them because they're telling you what you can take them at their word. And this is the popes and various Vatican officials, they repeat this kind of thing on a very regular basis, and they do so in very clear language. So, I mean, it's not something there should be any question about. But instead of being freaked out and asking questions and preaching against this stuff, it seems like evangelicals, it seems like Protestants are willing to go out of their way to try to make alliances with the Roman Church state. And one of the reasons why I say this is, there was a headline a few years ago. I think it was when the Pope Francis came to the United States for a visit in the fall of 2015. But it was an article in Christianity Today. It was called "From Antichrist to Brother in Christ," and it was chock full of all these quotes from supposedly representative, big shot evangelical pastors or figures, leading figures, talking about how great the Pope was. And the Pope's teaching, the teaching of the Roman Catholic Church, cannot be reconciled with the Bible. At the very heart of the Bible is justification by faith alone, or justification by belief alone, as John Robbins liked to put it. And what that means is that our sins are forgiven, that we are considered acceptable in the sight of God, not based on anything that we do, but by faith in Christ, in his finished work on the cross, and his righteousness imputed to us. It's not something that we do. It's not the work of our hands that saves us. It's the work of Christ that saves us. And that was the central doctrine of the Reformation. And that's something that the Bible teaches. It's something that the Protestants affirmed, and it's something that the Roman Catholic Church denies. And so, I mean, the Roman Catholic Church, when we talk about that, I mean, it is not a Christian church. And for that reason, it isn't. And there are a lot of other terrible doctrines that are out there. And of course, one of them is the globalism. But, the globalism of Rome really comes from the denial of the gospel of Jesus Christ. So, yes, the Roman Catholic Church is very clearly a globalist organization, but there are very few, not only just churches that won't point this out, or not only are there very few churches that will point out the globalism of Rome, there are very few news organizations as well that will do this. I think it's interesting that Breitbart pointed this out. Every now and then, even Alex Jones will talk some about the globalism of the Roman Catholic Church. Now, he doesn't lay the axe to the root the way that he should, but he does at least occasionally talk about this. And in fact, I think that InfoWars did cover this particular story a couple weeks ago as well. Now, one thing that this is something that is worth pointing out. I talk some about the New World Order, Romanism, versus the Westphalian World Order, Protestantism. So the New World Order is basically just globalism. Think of it like that. And the biggest purveyor, not the only one, but certainly the biggest purveyor of globalism is the Roman Catholic Church. The New World Order is essentially geopolitical Roman Catholicism. It's opposed, on the other hand, by the Westphalian World Order, which is geopolitical Protestantism. And let's learn a little bit about that. There's an article that I found out on the web. I think it's a pretty good article. It's from the Constitution Party, written by a gentleman named Darrell Castle. And the title of it is "The Peace of Westphalia and the New World Order." So let's just read through a little bit of this. We hear the term New World Order all the time. We're afraid of the term. And I would add that he didn't write this, but we should be afraid of the term. But if there's a new world order, then what of the old world order? The political order which has existed for hundreds of years. If we are suspicious of and resistant to the new world order, what order are we trying to conserve? To find out the history and character of the old world order, we need to travel back in time to the 17th century, to the time of the 30 Years' War. The 30 Years' War was fought in Europe from 1618 to 1648. It began when the when the Austrian Habsburg Empire tried to impose Roman Catholicism on their Protestant subjects in Bohemia. So there was this terrible pan-European war is what took place. This pan-European war. There are many, I mean, there are many nations involved. You know, we sometimes think of World War I and World War II as being very devastating, which they were. But there was a war that took place back in the 17th century that was maybe just as devastating. It was terrible, and it went on not just for 4 years or four. I guess what World War I was 4 years, and World War II. Well, I guess that was 6 years. Well, this war went on. The 30 Years' War went on, oddly enough, for 30 years. Believe it or not, it lasted for 30 years, and it was settled by the Treaty of Westphalia, and that's why what they call the old world order here in this article, the old world order, or even the existing world order, is really the Westphalian world order, and it is geopolitical Protestantism, because it was the Protestants that won the 30 Years' War. The good guys won that fight. And what came out of that was the world order. And if I would, and I'm going to describe it to you in just a minute, but you might be asking, okay, well, what does the Westphalian world order mean? What are the chief ideas of the Westphalian world order? And I'm going to tell it to you. I'm going to actually read through them. This article it does a very nice job sort of summarizing what the Westphalian world order is. And you're probably going to say, well, that just sounds like common sense. Well, remember, it took 30 years of warfare to establish these principles. And throughout most of human history, these ideas have not prevailed. So it's not common sense. I mean, this is actually something that and I think you can argue and find this in the scriptures themselves. But let's just take a look at how Darrell Castle summarizes the Westphalian world order. And he gives us 4 bullet points here. First, each state could keep its own religion without outside interference. Second, the international affairs of each nation state was to be left alone. So you didn't have one country trying to meddle in the affairs of another country. The nation state was to be the highest form of government, and these nation states would not be governed by clerics or religious leaders. So we have the separation of church and state. Each nation agreed to only attack other nations if it was immediately and strategically threatened. They would no longer attack each other just because one nation did not like what the other was doing. No preemptive attacks, only immediate threats. So, that's I think a pretty good summary of the Westphalian world order. Let's go back to number 3 there. The nation state was to be the highest form of government, and these nation states would not be governed by clerics or religious leaders. Okay, so I mean, right there, right there, we can see how the Westphalian world order is adamantly opposed to the New World Order, because the New World Order is all about globalism. We read earlier about how let's go back to that article there by Rod Dreher, and he quotes this press release that you find, this press release from Reuters. So let's read that. The Vatican calls for the establishment of a supranational authority with worldwide scope and universal jurisdiction to guide economic policies and decisions. Such an authority should start with the United Nations as its reference point, but later become independent and be endowed with the power to see to it that developed countries are not allowed to wield excessive power over weaker countries. And you can see in this quote here from Pope Francis, he says, in this regard, I was also note the need for a reform of the United Nations, and likewise of economic institutions and international finance, so that the concept of the family of nations can acquire real teeth. We go back to that quote from Laudato Si. This is again Pope Francis. Given this situation, it is essential to devise stronger and more efficiently organized international institutions with functionaries who are appointed fairly by agreement among national governments and empowered to impose sanctions. So you can see all of this is about global government and about subjecting nations to a world government that sits above all of the other national governments and bosses all of these recalcitrant nations around. But in the Westphalian world order, the nation state was to be the highest form of government, and these nation states would not be governed by clerics or religious leaders. So if you are if you're somebody who favors the nation state is the highest form of government, you are, at least in a geopolitical sense of the word, you're a political Protestant. And that's one of the things that that Donald Trump did that I thought was quite good. Donald Trump was a champion of the Westphalian World Order. Now, I don't think he ever came out and specifically talked about the Westphalian World Order, but he definitely championed what's sometimes called the national sovereignty. That the United States, as well as other nations, had the ability to run their internal affairs the way they wanted to without outside interference. And of course, he was hated by the political establishment in part because of that. And not just the political establishment in the United States, but also the political establishment around the world, all of these globalists. I remember when Donald Trump was running for president back in 2016, what first got me interested in actually supporting Donald Trump was when he punched back on the Pope. The Pope made some comment, that those who want to build walls, not bridges, that man, isn't Christian. And of course, it was a veiled reference. The Pope didn't mention Donald Trump by name, but he was, of course, talking about Donald Trump, whose probably most prominent campaign promise 2016 is he wanted to build a wall along the southern border of the United States between the U.S. and Mexico to prevent all of the illegal immigration, the migration, the human trafficking and smuggling, drug smuggling, all of this stuff that's going on. And he repeatedly talked about Donald Trump, that is. Once he became president, he repeatedly talked about the importance of national sovereignty. I mean, this was something that was very much the case with Donald Trump. And of course, Donald Trump, I don't believe Donald Trump is a Christian, but I do think that he had a Christian understanding of national sovereignty. And of course, this was something that very much put him at loggerheads with the Pope. And of course, now we have a Roman Catholic. We have Joe Biden, Roman Catholic, who's president. And Joe Biden actually has a picture of the Pope in the Oval Office, picture of Pope Francis. There was a photo that was taken of Joe Biden, I don't know, a month or two back, and he's sitting there at the Resolute desk in the Oval Office, and you can see this picture of Pope Francis behind his right shoulder. I think it was his right shoulder. Anyway, whatever shoulder, you could actually see this picture of Pope Francis back there. And of course, Joe Biden is working very hard to carry out Pope Francis' agenda. He's doing that with immigration. He's doing that with the Green New Deal. Joe Biden has put us back into the United States. He's put the United States back into the Paris Accord. All of this globalist stuff. And basically, he's just enacting Pope Francis' political agenda. He's doing it here in the United States. And I think this is something that as Christians, I mean, we very much need to pray against, and we need to speak out against, and we need to resist this, because it's a very evil agenda. So, what I would say here is all of this talk that we hear, about the New World Order, just remember, the big takeaway is that that's geopolitical Romanism, and that it's an attempt to supplant the Westphalian World Order, which is the existing world order, which was established as a result of the Treaty of Westphalia in 1648. And the Westphalian World Order is geopolitical Protestantism. Now, one of the things that's kind of interesting, maybe in closing and talking about the comparison between the New World Order and the Westphalian World Order, you might expect that at the time of the Treaty of Westphalia that the Pope wouldn't be happy about that. And in fact, the Pope was very unhappy about all this. This is a quote from Innocent X in a bull he wrote called Zelo Domus Dei, Zeal of the House of the Lord. Is that's the Latin title, but it's translated Zeal of the House of the Lord. And this is what Pope Innocent X said when referring to the Treaty of Westphalia. He called it, quote, null, void, invalid, iniquitous, unjust, damnable, reprobate, inane, empty of meaning and effect for all time, end quote. So that's what the Pope thought about the Treaty of Westphalia. And I guess you'd have to say, well, he was a little bit triggered. He didn't like that one bit, and of course it's understandable why he wouldn't like it one bit, because it was a major blow. We talk about the Reformation dealing a mortal blow to the Roman Church state, and it did, and it was very devastating for the power of Rome. But of course, Rome is now an institution recovering from a mortal blow, or a mortal wound, I should say. So where is all this heading? So we talk about the New World Order, we talk about the Westphalian World Order, and we talk about the big push for globalism. So where is all this heading? Well, in his book, and this is actually one of my, sorry about the little microphone noise there. This is one of my all-time favorite books. It's called, hold it up here for those who are watching. It's called Ecclesiastical Megalomania, the Economic and Political Thought of the Roman Catholic Church. This was written by John Robbins in 1999. It was published then anyway. So it's a little bit over 20 years old, I guess 22 years old. But it's an exceptional book. And if you want to understand the politics and economics of the Roman Catholic Church, you have to read this book. It's available from the Trinity Foundation, and it's a very reasonably priced. I think you can get a paperback version for about $10. And it's worth every penny you pay for it. I highly, highly, highly recommend this book. But let's see. There's a chapter in chapter 19. It's just titled World Government. So I'm going to just read a little bit out of this for you. This is a quote here. Quote, "What the Roman Church state accomplished on a small scale during the Middle Ages is what it desires to achieve on a global scale in the coming millennium." End quote. So what Rome's trying to do is they're basically trying to impose scalable tyranny on the world. Of course, they ran Europe up until the time of the Protestant Reformation, when they received their a mortal wound from the widespread preaching of and belief in the gospel of justification by faith alone. But what they're trying, Rome is an institution recovering from this mortal wound, and they're trying to scale up their tyranny. They did this in Europe on the scale of I guess the continent, or at least the region of Europe, and now they're trying to push this on the whole world. Can they do it? I don't know. It depends on certain things, the way you understand the book of Revelation. I'm not trying to get in on all of that, into all of that right now, but there's no question that's their intention, is to do this. Rome once again, it wants to be the woman who rides the beast. That's what they're aiming for. That's what they're trying to do. And you need to understand this, especially as Christians. You need to understand that Rome wants to rule the world. And that's not a joke. It's not conspiracy theory. They've come right out and they say it. Rome loves world government. Now, I think it's very interesting, that in the Bible, we see an early attempt to create world government in the Tower of Babylon. You can see the account of that in Genesis chapter 11. But God cut that work short. And not only did he confuse the language of the people, but he also separated them into individual nations. So instead of one all-powerful kingdom, the people were separate. They were separate nations, and they were separate governments. And the Apostle Paul tells us the reason why God did that. And this was in his sermon on Mars Hill. Paul tells us that God did this, quote, so that they, and that's the nations of men, should seek the Lord and hope that they might grope for him and find him. With the Tower of Babel, it apparently was something where they were trying to reach heaven on their own, and it was this sort of giant world government, very idolatrous, very arrogant, and they wanted to accomplish this reaching to the heavens all in their own steam. They didn't want to do things God's way. They wanted to do things their way, and God ended that work. And he broke up that worldwide empire. into separate nations. One of the most important concepts in the American government that was it was built into our system was the idea of the separation of powers. You have the separation of powers at the federal level. You have the executive, legislative, and judicial branches of government. But it wasn't even just the federal government where there was separation of powers. The federal system that we have, where you have not only a federal government, but you have state governments, you have local governments, you have competing authorities. And the state governments do not derive their power from the federal government. In fact, the federal government derives its power from the states. And you also have local governments that are independent of the states of which they are a part. So you have federal, state, and local governments, and they all have authority, and these are competing spheres of authority. And by breaking up government like that, it makes it more difficult for evil men to seize control of the apparatus of government and impose their wicked ideas. And some people will get out and they'll denounce this, as legislative gridlock and this kind of thing. Well, thank goodness we have that. Praise God that we have government that's where you have multiple centers of power. Thank God for that, because it's these big, huge empires throughout world history that have done so much damage. And that seems to be, with sinful men, the way that we are. I mean, when you get these giant organizations with unlimited power, or at least maybe not unlimited, but certainly a great deal of power, they also can do a great deal of harm. And one conclusion we can take from the Tower of Babel and from Paul's sermon is that God disapproves of world government, and he approves of a system of co-equal nation states. That is to say that God hates the New World Order, and he approves of the Westphalian World Order. Now, we can expect the Antichrist popes of Rome to continue their attempts to impose world government, as their designs are at odds with the Lord's designs. Of course, they're going to lose in the end. The popes are going to lose in the end, but that doesn't mean that they can't cause a lot of damage between now and the return of Christ. They can. And it almost seems likely that they will. And as believers, it's our duty to be salt and light in the world. I mean, in this world seems to be getting darker all the time. It's our job to be salt and light. It's our job to pray against Antichrist. I think even Charles Spurgeon said that someplace. He said it was the duty of every Christian to pray against Antichrist. Well, that is our duty. And that's something that we need to do. And it's something that I think for too long we have not done as Protestants. So this is something that very much needs to change. And with that, I think I'll wrap things up here for today. Thanks so much for listening. I really do appreciate that. I always enjoy being able to do these podcasts, and I hope that you got something out of that. I pray that you did, and we'll look forward to being back next week, maybe with my the week off and having some extra time. I don't know, who knows, maybe I might even be able to sneak in an extra podcast or something like that here through the week. So we'll see. But anyway, at any rate, until next time, I wish you a blessed Lord's Day, and look forward to talking to you again here sometime soon. So until that next time, may the Spirit of truth guide you in all truth as you read and study God's Word. Good night, everybody.